Ordinary life had a rhythm I could set my watch to. Monday flights, Thursday returns, the suitcase parked under the bench like a loyal dog. My consulting work ran on calendars and hotel coffee, and home felt preserved in amber while I chased deliverables. My wife taught art part-time, baked on Sundays, and kept the hydrangeas militant about their water schedule. We hosted simple dinners, traded chores with a practiced handoff, and texted photos of the dog pretending to talk. I believed competence was a kind of love performed daily, trash out on the right night, oil changed before the light complained. Our daughter was away at camp, sending postcards about archery and songs by a lake that swallowed phones. The house hummed with mechanical kindness, thermostat whispers, dryer clicks, the door hinges familiar complaint. I wore predictability like armor and assumed longevity meant safety. Nothing in that hum suggested another script was drafting itself nearby. Small disturbances crept in as ordinary variations. She stopped answering my airport check-ins, blaming studio hours and a kiln that misbehaved. The dog's mood tilted restless on our calls, nails tapping tile at hours he usually slept. A neighbor mentioned unfamiliar laughter drifting over the fence on a weeknight, a sound I filed under book club. A new wine opener appeared, sleek and expensive, even though ours wore 10 years of cork scars. Her car clock shifted forward 9 minutes and stayed there, a private time zone that never matched mine. Gym leggings I did not recognize dried on the guest bath rod alongside a second towel that never returned to the linen shelf. Playlists at home changed to bands I did not know, and the fruit bowl held figs she'd once said she disliked. None of it demanded accusation. It simply thinned the air and lengthened the pause between ordinary sounds. First suspicions found me when a client canceled midweek and pushed deliverables to next quarter. I rescheduled my flight without announcing it, imagining a surprise dinner and the solved sink leak as pleasant corrections a long month deserved. In the rental car, I pictured her face bright with relief and the dog skidding across the hallway like punctuation. Somewhere between the toll plaza and exit 18, the image refused to sync with the unease idling in the background. Her texts had grown shorter, more efficient, like receipts instead of conversation. The shared calendar showed gray blocks titled planning stacked precisely where we used to eat late dessert. I told myself marriages survive asymmetry, that fatigue makes patterns look like plots, and that a surprise would reset us. Then the highway sign for our exit appeared and my hands tightened on the wheel, already bracing for a door I suddenly feared to open. Tangible clues waited patiently in our entryway. A second pair of running shoes sat beside hers, mud drying in crescents that did not match our route. The umbrella stand hosted a jacket I did not own, cut slim and perfumed with a detergent we had never used. In the kitchen, 2 glasses sweated rings onto the butcher block. A cork lay beside the sleek opener like a shrug. The trash held a bakery box from a place across town we avoided because parking felt vindictive. The dog greeted me with relief and confusion, zigzagging between me and the hallway as if trying to explain a plot without language. Upstairs, the duvet wore a collapse I recognized from lovesick years, but the timing and geometry were wrong. I stood still long enough for my pulse to settle into a practical tempo, then followed the house's breadcrumb trail toward the truth it was already holding. Verification required only presence. I paused at the threshold while late afternoon folded the curtains into gray, the room registering the kind of stillness that follows sudden movement. My wife sat upright, braid loosened, eyes fixed on a middle distance where explanations tend to rehearse. Beside her, a man reached for a shirt, posture careful, the choreography of someone stepping into light he had not planned for. I recognized him from a running group she had mentioned weeks earlier, a detail that clicked into place like a bad puzzle piece. No words presented themselves because none could square the geometry of the bed with the calendar we had agreed to. I stepped back into the hallway and felt the house breathe around me, pipes settling, floorboards accepting weight, a structure choosing neutrality while its occupants learned new math. The truth stood patient, requiring only acknowledgement and the next deliberate action. Confirmation carried a strange calm. Downstairs I poured water and listened to the refrigerator hum like a machine refusing spectacle. Evidence arranged itself without drama, 2 plates drying on the rack, a playlist paused mid-song, a sweater draped over a chair that was not ours. I texted the neighbor to borrow the backyard for the dog, inventing an errand to give a creature I loved a softer hour. Cold anchored my hands until tremor settled into purpose. I did not interrogate or stage a tableau. I wrote down time, noticed the jacket brand, and took a photo of the shoes for sequence rather than story. My heartbeat slowed into something administrative, the rhythm you use for emergencies that benefit from lists. By the time the glass emptied, I understood that the home I left on Monday was gone, and that the one I stood inside could still be made safe with boring, necessary decisions. Immediate fallout looked like logistics. I changed the front door code, preserved the left open texts and receipts, and moved essentials to the guest room with the competence I usually spent on flight connections. I emailed my manager to mark the week personal and placed my ring in the ceramic dish she made long before this story. I booked a locksmith for morning, drafted a list titled Next 48 Hours, and wrote verbs, not arguments. Dog with neighbors, financial triage, attorney consult, communication limited to practicalities. I set my phone to allow only family through the night and placed a glass of water on the dresser like a small promise. When she came downstairs, the silence between us measured choices rather than volume. I felt grief arrive like weather but decided to pack only what could travel safely. Names, dates, and a path that would not require witnesses. Cutting ties started with boundaries that could fit on a page. I told my wife that conversations would narrow to finances and housing while we prepared a separation, and that everything else could wait in a closed drawer. I asked the man to leave without ceremony and noted the jacket, the shoes, the glasses, not as trophies but as line items. I blocked numbers after forwarding what counsel would need, archived photos instead of deleting them, and collected sentimental objects into a box marked later. 2 friends received neutral assignments, one to redirect relatives, one to manage carpools when our daughter returned, so I would not become the spokesperson for my own wound. I silenced group threads that could turn pity into theater, and opened windows to let heat carry out the smell of a day I refused to memorize. Boundaries did not heal anything that night, they simply stopped the injury from traveling farther. Legal and practical logistics turned grief into sequence. The attorney translated chaos into drafts, temporary support, property inventory, discovery requests, and a parenting plan that kept exchanges neutral and visible. HR updated beneficiaries. The bank opened a solo account. The mortgage servicer annotated the file with calm professionalism. I built a spreadsheet of essential bills with due dates and confirmation numbers, color-coded for a brain that needed simple signals. Retirement statements printed and slid into a fireproof box beside passports and warranties. I requested copies of everything and labeled a binder with a name so boring it felt like medicine. Stability arrived as case numbers and new passwords that belonged only to me, drawers closing that had hung open for months, dangerously loose. I scheduled therapy and put the appointment on the same calendar that once held anniversaries, proof that care could be planned. Family dynamics required honesty sized for a child. When our daughter came home from camp, we explained that adults sometimes keep promises badly and that 2 houses would make her days steadier. Her questions stayed practical. Practice times, whose driveway for carpools, which stuffed animals would travel, and I answered with a magnet calendar she could rearrange herself. Teachers learned just enough to watch for drift. Teammates' parents offered rides without requesting details. Grandparents wanted stories and received logistics. At exchanges we kept tones clipped and civil, proof that politeness can be a life jacket. I banned names from our living room that did not belong to the people who lived there and turned down music that remembered for me. The dog adapted by rotating beds like an envoy. By month's end, laughter returned in flashes, bright and ordinary, and sleep lengthened into something earned rather than negotiated. Rebuilding arrived disguised as chores I had postponed for seasons. I fixed the drip under the sink and took measured pride in a P-trap that no longer sulked. I replaced the porch light, learned the ladder's balance, and let the warm bulb make a small case for evening. I sold a chair shaped by absence and rearranged the room until sight lines stopped arguing with memory. At sunrise I circled the lake, not to outrun grief but to practice finishing loops I set for myself. A weekend finance course returned authority to numbers, and a savings account named Future Repairs grew by modest, regular transfers. Friends who stayed brought soup instead of strategies. I learned to ask for specific help without apology. The folder of evidence slid into a drawer. The point shifted from proving harm to practicing care. Identity followed behavior, quiet and durable. I kept going. Reflection reframed the early return as rescue rather than catastrophe. Coming home did not break the marriage. It exposed the rupture while repair was still my job, not my performance. Trusting had not been foolish. The breach had been constructed across small rooms and ordinary hours. Forgiveness, where it sprouts, will be a clearance within me that refuses to store poison, not a shortcut back to ruins. I will keep emails precise, budgets honest, and routines boring on purpose to protect the child at the center. When the house hums, thermostat whispers, dryer clicks, hinge complaints, I let the sounds be neither omen nor nostalgia, only evidence of living. Forward looks ordinary and therefore precious. Clear calendars, repaired hinges, early walks, and a door that locks because my hand knows the code. Hope returns as maintenance done daily, measurable and mine. I will be the person who trusts his instruments and adjusts course when dials refuse to lie.